is on making higher education accessible for people with disabilities. We have a really great panel of speakers who are going to be able to kind of provide you different perspectives in terms of what services, supports, and accommodations are provided for students seeking higher education who also have disabilities, and how these supports are able to make it possible for them to be able to enjoy the same quality of education as anyone else on campus. So with that being said, we do have, again, a great panel. They're coming and hailing really from all over the state, which we're really excited about, and also being able to provide different perspectives. Some are from larger schools, some are from smaller schools, some are coming from historically Black colleges and universities. So with that being said, I would like to go ahead and introduce you to our panel. So our first speaker is Beverly, Dr. Beverly Harris. And I won't go over all the nitty-gritty details about all the wonderfulness that is Dr. Beverly Harris, because you should be able to find her information in her speaker bio on the website. One of the things that I do want to call it is that she apparently is the founding director of the program at Norfolk State University, which is extremely impressive. And so we're definitely looking forward to having her speak and share her perspective and her information. The next person who will be speaking will be Whitney Wells, who is coming from the University of Virginia College-wise. Is that correct? Yes. Way out in Southwest. So we love the fact that you are representing that part of the region. We love Southwest. So anyone from Southwest, we love y'all dearly. And so she'll be also providing a really unique perspective, talking about basically essentially being a one-woman show in terms of addressing all of the accommodation needs within a smaller but still inclusive campus. And then we will end things with a bang with Jan Shea. Is that how you pronounce your last name? Okay, great. And she'll take us down and drill us down a little bit further into a much more specific type of program that is more tailored to maybe a subpopulation of the disabilities community, but she'll be able to provide a great example of the types of programs that can be in place for people with disabilities. So without further delay, again, you can see more information about how wonderful these individuals are in their bios. I will not delay things further, and so I will now turn it over to Dr. Beverly Harris. You are up first. And you are currently on mute.
I said I wasn't going to do that. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Disability Rights and Resource Expo, Making Higher Education Accessible to People with Disabilities. I am Beverly Boone Harris, and the founding director of the Office of Accessibility Services here at Norfolk State University, where we are committed to promoting equal access to the university programs, services, and activities for students with documented disabilities. We practice 3 steps for our initial registration process. Step 1, complete accessibility services application. We recommend that students who have been accepted to the university complete the accessibility application at least 45 days prior to classes beginning. Step 2, provide documentation. Students must provide documentation of their disability. Documentation must describe the nature of the impairment and potential impact on the student's ability to participate in the university's educational program and services. Medical documentation may include a signed letter from a physician, psychologist, rehabilitation counselor. Step 3, complete intake interview. Once the completed application and proper documentation is received, OASIS will review these materials to determine eligibility for the services and support. Due to COVID-19, a virtual intake meeting or phone conference will be scheduled to further discuss accessibility services, process, and guidelines. Accommodations are made on a case-by-case basis and are not retroactive. Students are required to update their registration each semester for accommodations by providing his or her class schedule. Understanding that while in secondary education, you were under the law of IDEA and you were entitled. Once accepted to college, you are under the law of ADA of 1990 and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. You become eligible for services, and it is the student's responsibility to self-identify. We have an assistive technology lab completely in use for students with disabilities, and in our assistive technology lab, we provide a wide range of software to aid in the provisions of accommodations. All AT Lab software can be accessed from the virtual lab online. I thank you.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Dr. Harris. I think it was very helpful to kind of hear the quick overview, high level overview of some of the things that NSU provides, and then also to kind of in general what you can expect when you're at a collegiate level. So thank you for that. Next up, we now have Whitney, who will now talk about being a one-woman army.
Yeah. Um, Let me share my screen with you guys too. Um, so hopefully that's working for you guys. Oh, trying to get on my chat there. Hello. There you go. Hopefully you guys are able to see that. So yeah, my name is Whitney Wells. I actually have two titles on campus. So not only do I work as the Director of Disability Services on campus, but I also work for a TRIO Student Support Services program as a counselor. So I know some folks at Norfolk State who were in that TRIO program, some fun folks there. But just to reiterate how that process works, it's very similar at our institution, and I think a lot of students, when they do transition to higher education, are used to a certain format. But then they understand that from college to college or university to university, things can be different in the process. So just to show you a little bit about where we are, if you guys can see. So we are on the very far western part of the state. I can actually get to, I think it's 4 or 5 other state capitals faster than I can get to Richmond. I can get to Nashville and Atlanta faster than I can get to Richmond. So again, we're a small school. So around 2,000 students. Our average class size is only 15, and we have and a majority of our students receive financial assistance. A lot of first generation college students attend our college. But I wanted to show you a picture of our school to sort of give you a little bit of an idea. We are not a flat campus, and we are not on flat terrain at all. We're actually on top of a mountain. So from an access standpoint, not only is it about education, but we also have to take a lot of physical stuff into account when it comes to our institution. I actually did my undergraduate work at the college, and none of these buildings were there. No, I'm just kidding. Just a couple of them were. They're still there when I did my undergraduate, but there were no elevators leading from the bottom of campus to the top of campus. Everything was steps. There were 3 sets of stairs, and they were killer. So, so we've come a long way. But when an elevator breaks down or things like that, you know, those are access issues that come into play. So that's just a view of our campus to let you know not only about educational access, but also programmatic access and physical access on our campus. So we're a small office, again, one woman show type thing. I do have a lovely person who helps me out with proctoring some tests sometimes. So our small office, we're located in academic affairs, in an academic support center. So students can just be referred to the academic support center instead of, hey, go see the disability folks or person. But again, just like Dr. Harris said, we cover all disability needs. So from the academic to housing, campus, community issues, the same types of accommodations. So testing, technology needs, note taking, single rooms, ESAs, and even academic coaching. So, and again, our process is individualized. And because we are so small, our campus gets to know our students, and our office knows our students. So that can be a really good resource because we are so small that people can pay attention because they know to see you or look for you. I will say with 2020, we did have some interesting things. Fortunately, our campus partnered with Innovate to Elevate in the fall of 2019. So all of our students were given, all full-time students were given an iPad, which has awesome built-in accessibility. So screen readers, notability for note-taking, clips for captioning videos, all of that. And we did training specifically with disability services as well with students and faculty. So moving to remote in the spring of 2020, we saw that faculty who never maybe took part in training before were suddenly like, oh my gosh, I got to do this. So that was a really great opportunity for us that we didn't see as a bad part. But we also had new accommodations that we had to face that weren't necessarily needed in a face-to-face classroom that were needed, such as, a student who didn't need captioning before needed captioning for a lecture, and things like that. So lots of dialogue to troubleshoot certain issues, not only issue related to the learning, but also with COVID, anxiety, depression, because we see the gamut of disabilities, not only physical and learning, but also going into health and mental areas. And again, that's our campus. So I'll turn it back over to him there.
All right, thank you, Whitney. And also showing like the picture with all the buildings, it kind of helps put things into perspective because it might be small, but it's actually not so small when you think about it when you're there.
I do apologize. Describing those pictures totally skipped my mind, so I apologize.
You're good. Okay, so now we are going to turn it over to Jan Shea, and she's going to drill us down a little further and talk about the specific program that she works with, working with portions of the disabilities community. So take it away.
Hey, thanks so much. I'm glad to be here today, guys. I'm going to share my PowerPoint so we can talk about ESIT in college. And let me get back to my notes so I don't lose myself. So thank you guys again. So we're going to be talking about ESIT in college and just the ESIT program at BCU. So to get going, to just kind of first go over like what is ESIT. So ESIT is it's a certificate program for students with cognitive disabilities at BCU. We've been around since 2001, and our focus is we are employment driven. So our focus is developing the skills that students need to get them ready for the world of work in their career of their interest. So that's both in the classroom, so finding classes that are a good fit for them, that are going to help them with their career goals, and then as well as campus jobs or professional development through their internships to also get them ready for the world of work. So that's kind of ESIT in a nutshell, but I wanted to open with one of our recent graduates, Ashante. She had talked about when she first got her welcome letter to come to ESIT and come to VCU, it was like finally her dream came true. And so college is an option for individuals with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities. And so I think as we talk about access to higher education, understanding that that is an option for them and that is a pathway for careers. So some highlights about ESIT: we are a nationally recognized program. We've been written up in the Atlantic Atlantic. We speak across the nation and collaborate with other inclusive post-secondary education programs. So we're always open to talking and sharing about our program. One of the neat things is that our VCU students, our ACIT students, have taken 288 unique classes across campus. So, so we've been in School of Education, School of Social Work, astronomy classes, criminal justice classes, all over based on those career interests for the students. A really unique highlight that I'm excited to share is that we have a current student who is working on a credential on top of a certificate. So when they graduate, they will have their ACIT certificate, as well as they will have a fundamental of computing digital technology credential. I have to read it verbatim. But that credential is going to be very helpful because he wants to go in a career of cyber security, and that is kind of a feeder program right into careers like Microsoft and other big tech companies. So he's really excited to be doing that program. From the employment side, we've had students work at 25 different unique places across campus. So matching their career goals or on skills that they need to work on to make them more career ready. And within 13 months of graduation, 22 out of 25 students, or 88%, were employed. So, we want to see our students graduate and go on to work. That's the goal. I wanted to spend some time today really jumping down the wonderful rabbit hole of COVID. That's why I'm talking to you virtually, and how we as a program had to shift from being an urban campus. VCU is very much, you're there on campus, you're part of the community, you're in Richmond and all of that. And so shifting to a completely virtual college experience, it didn't happen overnight and it did not happen in a bubble. So we had to lean into all of our campus partners. We had to dig deep within our own staff of how do we do this? What does this look like? Adapting our program to a virtual setup right now, it's shown some light on what's been really good for us, and it's shown some light on where we need to improve. So some of the things that we adapted that were great were going and looking at how to move all of our events virtually. So students, when they're accepted into ACIT, over that first summer, they attend a family night, they attend their personal person-centered planning meeting, they attend orientation, course registration. All of those things were on person, getting familiar with the campus. We now had to take that off the table and say, let's meet on Zoom. And then also, what is Zoom? So working them through all of those things, we were all very nervous about it, but what actually came out of it was an opportunity to really get to know the students on a more one-on-one level and get to know about those career interests. And that fed into having a richer course registration experience. We have more students taking unique classes this semester than they've had in the past few years. So classes that are very geared towards their career interest, even down to an intro to university for business majors, an intro to university for art majors. And so really kind of honing in on what those skills are. We also got to get really creative and have fun with it. And, using a virtual family night where students had, where we typically tried to introduce them to the other campus resources, we made a funny video so they could see what does VCU police, who are some of those faces, who are some of the VCU career services, VCU SAO office, our disability support service office, kind of get connected to those services. One area that we're getting that light shown and seeing what we've got to work on and really keep adapting and finding ways is coaching sessions. So students who come into the ACIT program, they're assigned an education coach. An education coach is a peer VCU student, and they work with them one-on-one outside of the classroom in a coaching session, but also attend classes with the student. And what's come up as some very simple things of making sure the education coach has access to the course, access to the Canvas or Blackboard, access to the Zoom link to join class, some of those quick little things like that, kind of finding ways around that, and then really pushing us to make sure that both the education coach and the student is proficient with Zoom, making sure they understand Zoom etiquette, working with a new family dynamic of a student explaining, I'm in class during this time, we need putting up signs on the door and navigating those kind of conversations. How do you talk to a student during class? How do you coach a student during class where the student's not physically there and you can't kind of just do a little side wave, but utilizing private texting, private chatting versus a group text, kind of those things. Those are all areas that we're still fine tuning. We're finding that it's working, but we definitely have room to grow with it. And I think the two big takeaways from our online kind of coaching environment is communication and flexibility have been our biggest allies, and we have to be constantly communicating with our professors, with the different entities that we're working with, our different partners across campus. So those have been that. The other big takeaway that we've had from COVID and seeing is the financial strain that COVID has put on our families and our students. We've had students that needed to take a deferment for enrollment for this year. And that was really hard to watch that navigation, and have to see them be that vulnerable with us and others. But then we've also had students that needed help navigating the emergency funding resources through VCU. So we've kind of had to navigate uncharted areas for us before. So those are two kind of some areas that we're still seeing and growing from. And I wanted to share, so ESIT is kind of uniquely situated that we are underneath the Center on Transition and Innovations at VCU. So part of my hat is with CTI and part of my hat is with ESIT. So some of the resources that we have been leaning into for our ESIT students this semester is the Get Ready for College course. That was something we had developed pre-COVID, and it's a self-paced course that students can take as they're transitioning from high school to college. It's great. It kind of breaks down all the different accommodations process, what does technology look like in college. It's a good resource. We've also created a transition tip series, and I would highlight, if you go on our Facebook page, you can see there's one from Stephanie and Chris, Enhancing College Skills, and that kind of gives some one-on-one tips. That's a great one. And then an ongoing resource is the COVID-19 and Transition webpage on our CTI website. So you can check that out, and we are constantly updating it with different resources and different areas there. So, and the links are all in the slides. So I think we're going to share the slides at the end as well. So, and then just thank you guys for allowing me to be here today. Here's how you can get in touch with me. I would not say call me because I don't always remember to check my voicemail because I'm now working remotely, but email is great. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jan, for that presentation. That was fantastic. And thank you everyone so far who have presented, Dr. Harris and Whitney. And so for everyone who is watching, we also have Dr. Joan Ehrlich. Is that how I pronounce? Okay, okay, good. We were having technical difficulties, such as life nowadays because of COVID-19. So I think we can all understand that. But she's here now. And again, yet another phenomenal professional in terms of advocating and helping to make sure that students have the accommodations that they need to be able to access their education. Dr. Ehrlich is representing Northern Virginia Community College System. So she'll be able to provide yet another unique perspective in terms of how, particularly in light of COVID-19 right now, students in that system in Northern Virginia are still able to enjoy their education in as an inclusive manner as possible. So without further ado, Dr. Ehrlich, take it away.
Okay, everyone, I hope can hear me. And I think, I don't know, I believe yeah, I think I have screen sharing privileges, so I will put up this PowerPoint. So what I would like to focus on today, and I really do not want to take a whole lot of time on this because I know we want to leave time for question and answer. I wanted to take this on a little bit different tack, especially, this being the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And this, the heightened awareness and discussion that all colleges and all institutions are having with regard to diversity and inclusion and equity. I wanted to take that kind of attack. That's kind of my new goal at NOVA and with other colleges as well, that we really continue or increase our consideration of working with students, with individuals with disabilities as members of cultural groups or minority groups. And so this is this picture of somebody in the disability icon of an individual in a wheelchair, but all decorated out in flowers, to me just kind of summed it up very beautifully. Another popular presentation of this idea of equity is this is a fairly, I think, popular cartoon comic sort of thing of three people of different sizes trying to see beyond a sort of obtuse fence, and each of them on a crate where each one gets to stand a little higher, but the tallest person probably didn't need it. And so in the next screen where they switch it so that the tallest person doesn't have a box, but the shortest person has two, showing what people often use as the example of what fairness is, which is fairness isn't that we all get the same thing, it's we all get what we need. And then in the last screen, more of an example of what we might call universal design, where by replacing the fence with something you can see through, everybody gets equal access. So that was, to me, was a great representation. And, you know, listed here are the different laws that have affected access and equality for people with disabilities. And just as a reminder, you know, everyone in our field is aware that the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was passed in 1990 and then amended and updated in 2008, it really was written as a civil rights law. And it, you know, it talks about all people with disabilities should have access to the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. And then again, you know, they included examples of other groups that have been addressed in earlier civil rights cases that sadly were where people with disabilities were omitted. And you know, the idea that regardless of race, color, sex, national origin, age, or religion, everybody's entitled to the same rights. This is where, to me, and so this is where I like to try to bring our focus to, not to say elsewhere, but just to broaden our focus. I have been trying to appeal to my colleagues that we not just look at people with disabilities as somebody who needs an accommodation, but again, that we regard them and respect them and recognize them as members of different cultural groups. And so I like to talk about all these different characteristics that are used to define a culture. And all of us who have worked, all of us who know people with disabilities, probably can appreciate that people with disabilities have some of these things in common with one another, outside of the other groups that they may belong to. So, you know, we all know that for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, their language and their communication modalities very much define and identify their cultural identification. Appearance is one that I like to point out because, you know, we talk a lot, when we talk about members of other cultural groups, we talk about how important it is on our campuses for students to see themselves represented. So students who are members of other minority groups like Hispanic or Black or other types of groups like gender identity, you know, these students, we appreciate the fact that they need to come on campus and see members of their community in the faculty and the staff. I think that's something we need to enhance when it comes to students with disabilities, that they also can see people with whom they can identify. Another thing I like to point out, and I know everybody here, you know, is aware of this, this is more for, say, faculty and staff, are some of the language and etiquette that we should be conscious of when we're referring to students with disabilities. And again, I'm kind of going through these quickly because I know we want to leave some time for questions. And even if there's any points about working in COVID specifically that maybe wasn't covered, that I can also address. So this is another favorite cartoon of mine related to universal design, is that there's this picture of a bunch of young kids waiting to get into what looks like a school building or a gymnasium. So you have the children in front of the stairs are covered with snow. You have one child in a wheelchair, in front of a ramp that is covered with snow. And there's a gentleman who's shoveling off the stairs, and the young boy in a wheelchair says, well, if you would shovel the ramp, then all of us could get in. And I think that's just a really great basic concept of what universal design is all about. When we provide, access to a person with a disability, then surely we're providing access for everybody. And another thing that I like to point out about in this illustration is something that I see happen in college sometimes, where faculty have a tendency, maybe they see a class of the students without disabilities as like a whole, and then the student with disabilities as another individual, where sometimes they feel like because they have to do something to provide access to the student with a disability, it's kind of putting a damper on the ability to accommodate the whole class, when in fact the reverse is true, that when you do something, or like what we might refer to as best practice, when you do something that enables access to a person with a disability, you're in fact opening it up to everybody, whether or not they've identified as having a disability. So these are just some examples of where universal design did not work. Barriers such as not being able to get in between shelves because you're in a wheelchair, or in this right side picture where you have a ramp leading up to a set of steps. So in fact, a person in a wheelchair is only going to get so far and then not be able to get any further. Again, an example where here's a snowy area where the path has been cleared right up to the point where a individual in a wheelchair gets to a curb cut, but the snow's been plowed up against the side. So again, not thinking of everybody who needs access. So this is a quote that I picked up somewhere, and it's a real favorite of mine, where this individual said, we talk about access versus inclusion. And this person, I thought, put it very well, said, if it has to be made accessible, it wasn't made for you. And that's, again, another way of thinking about universal design. And as all of, any of us who work in, let's say, a school or a college knows, that often we have our classes, our materials, everything is in place. And then comes the student with a disability who says, well, I need an accommodation so that I can access that. And really the message, again, that's going to that student is, oh, I didn't think about you when I created this space or this environment or this material. So now I have to go back and reconfigure it. If things are accessible when the student comes, then the message to that student is, we have already been anticipating you. You are as welcome here as everybody else. And that's a way of demonstrating that when I created my video, I put captions in it. So I was already anticipating that you would be here. This is not sort of an afterthought. And so what I often do is I just ask professors, when you are creating things, or when you're looking at your environment, or you're planning an activity, look around you and think about, would a person with a certain disability be able to access this? If it's a video, or if it's a print material, if it's environment and space, physical space, again, think ahead about, would a person with a different disabilities be able to use and access this material? And if the answer is no, then in creating your plan, your environment, your activity, think about what would make this usable by that individual, so that it's not the afterthought. And let's see, I'm not, okay. So then again, this is again what I was just talking about. And this is just a definition of an accommodation. It is a modification to a policy, a practice, or a procedure. And sometimes we still have to remind faculty that saying that something is your standard practice or your policy is not in and of itself a reason to deny an accommodation. Because in fact, when we provide an accommodation, we are doing so, it may be a modification of your particular practice or policy. This is really internal for NOVA, where people can go. We do have, I like to think, a pretty robust website right now so that faculty and staff have a place they can refer to on how to do captioning, how to create accessible documents, and so on. And one other thing that I mentioned is on our NOVA's website, we have templates for accessible PowerPoints and accessible documents. So faculty, when they're creating different materials, they can go to our website, which is what this is here, the link, and they can find their accessible, they can find the template so that they can create a document that is accessible from the beginning. And I'm just going to end there. Like I said, I was going to go through that fairly quickly, but I want to end there so that if there are specific questions about access during COVID, if I can answer any of those as well.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Doctor. That was a very comprehensive presentation and very well done in terms of discussing how to be inclusive, even in these current situations. And I particularly appreciate the fact that you included a link to accessible PowerPoint templates, because my goodness, how difficult is it sometimes to be able to make sure that these things are truly accessible. So thank you for that. We'll definitely be using that. So this was a question that was submitted, and it's in relation to, I think, an acronym that one of you ladies utilized in your presentation. The person asked, what does ESA stand for? So whoever wants to jump in on that.
I think that was on one of my slides.
Okay.
So the ESA is an emotional support animal.
Great. So to go along those lines, because I think every field is chock full of acronyms. So are there, just for giggles, are there any other common acronyms that people or students maybe should be hip to, so that when they're speaking to someone like you, or maybe speaking to another person on campus, they're not going to be that's not going to be a barrier or a challenge?
Well, one that we use, and I think there are different varieties or versions, is at our college, the letter that students get that lists their accommodations is called a memorandum of accommodations, and that's a mouthful. So we refer to it as an MOA. And I'm sure every college they have a letter or a memo or something, and it's not unusual for us to talk to a student about their MOA and they don't even know what we're referring to. So it's also a good reminder of us when we get into our lingo and our acronyms to be careful about that.
Sim, I would like to share that my program in itself is OASIS, Office of Accessibility Services and International Students. We have two distinct areas. I'm the PDSO for the international students, and of course, the director of the whole program and the accessibility services. So when we're speaking of accessibility services, we refer to that part of the acronym. And then we were talking about international students, that's on the end, of course, is the international students. So OASIS people have learned to contact our school and refer to OASIS.
I was gonna say very similar to that, Dr. Harris, of knowing what that disability support office is even named. So Disability Support Services, or OASIS, or BCU is now called SEO, which is the Student Access Educational Opportunity. I'm still a mouthful for me. So yeah, so even knowing what does disability support office look like on their campus as you're starting to navigate your college experience.
I would even weigh in on just those points of the titles that we use to refer to ourselves from that same cultural perspective that I've been trying to emphasize. As I'm sure my colleagues know, we've all had some really in-depth conversations, I would even say debates, about how we should refer to our office. And some people sometimes have a tendency to use terms other than disability because they feel like that term in itself can be sort of stigmatizing. And, you know, depending on your perspective, I come from sort of the perspective of, I want us to use that term because I don't want it to become a source of stigma. You know, I want people to be able to embrace the fact that they are a person with a disability, but not something that they should kind of shy away from. So even that, I think, has an interesting philosophical perspective to it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all, ladies, for humoring my kind of off the wall question. But again, our lives can be ruled by acronyms sometimes. And so it is nice to kind of consider how you can be inclusive, even when it comes to everyday language, right? So we have 2 more minutes. Folks, if you want to submit a quick question, you have like 2 minutes. If not, in the meantime, while I'm checking the chat to see if there are any more questions, I do want to say thank you very, very much to each and every one of you for your presentations and providing your perspectives. I definitely learned a lot today from each of you. I'm pretty sure everyone who sat in on the session learned a lot. So thank you so much for your time. Whether or not you are a founding director or you are a one-woman army or somewhere in between, you know, we definitely appreciate you taking the time and putting forth the effort to help us to be better informed self-advocates, and also professional advocates maybe for the students that we might be working with in our line of work.